And at this time, we'll open up the hearing on Senate Bill 313, which revises provisions relating to mental health education. Chair Lang, whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Flores, members of the Senate Committee on Education. I am Roberta Lang and I represent Senate District 7 in Clark County. I am pleased to be here today to introduce Senate Bill 313, which speaks to mental health content standards in health courses and mental health education training for teachers. I would also like to introduce to my left, your right, Robert Barsel, who is presenting Senate Bill 313 with me today. I want to begin to say how incredibly impressed I am with Mr. Barsel's knowledge, research of this topic, his dedication to helping others experiencing grief and mental health challenges, and his drive to see this much needed legislation through. Before I turn things over to Mr. Barsel, I'd like to go over some background. At its May meeting of last year, Robert and I co-presented to the Joint Interim Committee on Education concerning mental health and support systems in Nevada's K-12 schools. Specifically, after reviewing local and national mental health information, Robert advocated for the implementation of a mental health wellness curriculum. Then at its August work session, the Interim Committee on Education voted unanimously to support the proposed curriculum, including coursework that teaches healthy coping skills, recognizes unhealthy ones, and I think I speak for everyone here when saying we are proud that the legislature continues to see bipartisan support in measures that strengthen mental health education and supports Nevadans, particularly our youngest. Before we go through the sections of the bill, I'll have Mr. Barsel go ahead with his PowerPoint, or wherever you are.
My name is Robert Barsel, B-A-R-S-E-L, for the record. Good afternoon, Vice Chair Flores and committee members. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to talk about this bill today, but especially thank you to Senator Lang for everything you've taught me along the way. There are two questions I want to ask and answer today. Why do we need this legislation, and how do we accomplish it? First, the why. In December 2021, the Surgeon General issued a rare public health advisory addressing youth mental health, which he called an emerging crisis exacerbated by the pandemic. In his 53-page report, he called to action for a whole society effort to recognize that mental health is an essential part of overall health. To give context, this was the first warning of its kind since the AIDS crisis. In addition, according to the CDC, in 2021, 44% of high school students reported that they persistently felt sad or hopeless during the past year. This number is even higher for girls at 57%, and 69% for members of the LGBTQ+ community. When left undertreated, coping with mental illness can contribute to self-harm, including thoughts of suicide, which is now the second leading cause of death for people ages 10 to 34. It is important to note that research indicates that the onset and/or progression of mental illness can be avoided when detected and treated early. Sadly, Nevada is even worse for wear. The 2022 America School Mental Health Report Card ranks us 51st in the nation overall in youth mental health. I should mention that Nevada has ranked 51st every year since the survey began in 2015. Of Nevada's 539,000 K-12 students, 42,000 have had a major depressive episode, and 28,000 of them did not receive any treatment. Since the pandemic, prevalence of anxiety in children and adolescents has increased by 9%, and depression has increased by 12%. The youth mental health crisis not only impacts success in the classroom, but also contributes to the incredibly important issue of teachers feeling unsafe in the workplace. One recent study found that 40% of teachers feel less safe in the classroom than they did 5 years ago. This rings especially true in Nevada, where Governor Lombardo, during his State of the State address, opened by mentioning the 2 teachers in the audience who were recently assaulted by students. I'd like to mention that I don't offer this information to disparage the many Nevada school employees who give so much to support our children. but instead to show just how pressing an issue this is in the Silver State. Before I go further, I think it's important to make the distinction between mental health and mental illness. Mental health is the way a person's thoughts, feelings, and behaviors affect their life. Mental health is a spectrum. In the same way that every individual experiences physical health as a continuum from well to ill, every individual has a mental health experience. As with physical health, mental health changes at different points in an individual's life, based on both biological and environmental factors. Mental illness is a condition that impacts a person's thinking, emotions, and mood, such that it interferes with their daily functioning. 20% of youth ages 13 to 18 experience serious mental illness. The most prevalent mental illnesses include ADHD, GAD, and GDD. Half of mental illnesses emerge by age 14, and 3/4 emerge before the age of 25. 50% of youth do not receive the treatment necessary for their mental health needs due to limited or no knowledge of the need, barriers to care, or stigma. And for those who do receive help, the average delay between onset of symptoms and intervention is 8 to 10 years. So, how does this impact our classrooms? Per SAMHSA, youth with untreated mental health issues often have difficulty controlling attention during learning tasks, have lower end-of-course grades, frequent absences from school, trouble making or maintaining friends, and difficulty following school routines and norms that often leads to suspension and expulsion. Historically, educators have been accustomed to thinking about a variety of factors known to affect young people's school-related outcomes, such as whether they come from historically underserved groups, whether they are learning English as a second language, or whether they are experiencing poverty. One important contributor to school outcomes that school leaders may not regularly consider is the mental health of their students. Per the 2011 National Children's Mental Health Report Card, children with mental health issues show more than double the rate of problematic and dangerous behavior. For example, 20% have been suspended compared to 9% of all children. 13% had school attendance problems compared to 6%. 11% had been engaged in drug abuse compared to 3%. And 6% had made a suicide attempt compared to 1% of all children. So, how do we help our students on this front? I believe that the solution needs to start in the classroom, from kindergarten through 12th grade. Studies have shown that addressing mental health issues earlier can prevent them from worsening and becoming mental illness. Fostering positive mental health in students has also been shown to enhance academic growth. One study in 2011 looked at school-based social and emotional learning programs involving more than 270,000 students in grades K through 12. And revealed that students who participated in these programs improved their grades and standardized test scores by 11 percentile points. To accomplish this, I propose we take a more proactive approach by educating youth, as opposed to many expensive, reactive approaches currently offered. For example, some have suggested that we hire more social workers and guidance counselors to meet the federal recommendations on counselor to pupil ratio, which, though a good idea, has a major issue. Per a Washington Post article in December of 2022, there currently aren't even enough social workers in the country to fill the need, let alone the millions of dollars it would cost to do so. Even for the fortunate minority of students that have access to mental health care, the average wait to get in to see a professional makes it an ineffective option. Before I go more in depth about the bill, I'd like to tell you a little bit more about my background and why this piece of legislation means so much to me. When I was 5 years old, my dad died due to a heart attack. Because of this, I was thrown into a new and scary world where fits of anxiety would prevent me from entering classrooms, and I was stuck in my head for most days to cope with the sudden change. Thankfully, my mom took me to an outside organization called Adam's Place, where they taught me about mental health, and there was a support group there to help me work through it. It was there that I learned the basic skills in approaching my mental health, and many of the same skills that I continue to use to this day. After being a participant for about 7 years, the organization was kind enough to train me to become a peer support facilitator, so that I could help other kids the way that they had helped me. I participated in 8-hour training in accordance with best practices as dictated by the National Association for Grieving Children, followed by a year-long shadowing of another facilitator. I was 12 years old at the time. I mention my age to highlight that the lessons I was taught between the ages of 5 and 11 and then learned to teach at 12 are not difficult, nor do they require any kind of specialized degree. In 2019, I realized that the skills I had learned could be useful to all kids, so I wrote my own non-Greece specific curriculum. I have been using that curriculum in peer support groups alongside a recreational therapist for the past 5 years at multiple locations, including my school and Nevada Youth Network, which is a local nonprofit supporting youth in an underserved community of color located in the historic west side of Las Vegas. I have learned from volunteering at these different places that although people have vastly different backgrounds and life experiences, everyone benefits from learning about their mental health. Unfortunately, when the pandemic hit, my ties to the kids were severed, so I decided to write a free 65-page workbook, as you can see above. This workbook synthesized all of my curriculum to create a free, easy resource to learn a foundation for your mental health. It has been read and approved by a licensed professional counselor. After 5 years of working with kids in support groups, I witnessed how they were using the lessons I taught to support their mental health. I realized that lessons like these could be, and more importantly, should be taught in schools. So I approached Senator Lang about an idea for a bill, and together we spoke to the NDE Superintendent Joan Ebert to determine the best approach for implementing these kinds of lessons in Nevada schools. Superintendent Ebert and her staff agreed that the best way would be to employ a scaffolding approach and introduce lessons from a young age and build on them, much like I do in my support groups. That method would ingrain the material early on and make difficult concepts much easier in later years. I know I've been slightly vague in what lessons refer to, so before going forward, I'd like to give you an example of one of the many lessons I do. In this activity, we have students take a paper plate and attach strings to it to create a mask. On one side, kids are asked to draw what they show on the outside. In this mask, you can see that this kid often puts up a very happy facade. But on the back side, we ask them to show how they truly feel on the inside. For example, this kid may often feel sadder than they let on. After that, we have kids go around and talk to each other using the same techniques that I had taught to help each other with their mental health. This activity also reinforces approaching all people with empathy and understanding, as we don't always know what's going on. I can personally speak to how impactful these lessons have been with the over 100 kids I have worked with in the past year. The first part of the bill focuses on including more specific guidelines relating to mental health education throughout K through 12 that the NDE will develop, which I hope will include similar lessons. The current standards for health only limitedly address mental health and must be expanded so schools and districts have a clear directive to develop and incorporate mental health lessons throughout K through 12 curriculum. I have researched various states and found California and New York to have the most comprehensive and relevant curriculum. I am including multiple slides here to give an example of what I would love in a perfect world to demonstrate how the current standards should be enhanced to provide the skills necessary to address all the issues laid out here today. For sake of time, I won't actually go through all of these individual slides, but if you'd like to view them on your own time, they are part of the deck. Another vital aspect to the bill is not only having the guidelines in place to implement an effective curriculum, but also to ensure that teachers are prepared to teach said curriculum and have the skill set to deal with their own mental health. K through 12 educators arguably hold one of the most important professions in our society, and yet they are underpaid, undervalued, and undersupported. Studies show that teachers also remain one of the most stressful professions, even when compared to doctors. A 2017 educator work-life study surveyed teachers across the U.S. and found that 61% reported they were always or often dealing with high stress over a 30-day period, and that was pre-pandemic. Between growing economic disparity, declining mental health in students, dwindling classroom resources, teachers are stressed. Many teachers work in environments that lack strong leadership and healthy school cultures. They have an increasing job demands and are not equipped with the necessary teaching or support to effectively manage the growing stressors in their profession. The next part of the bill deals with ways to support teachers in that effort. The course developed by the Commission will ensure that teachers have a firm understanding of the new mental health concepts that will be implemented and how to teach them so that students will have a better understanding of their own mental health. I would like to clarify here that this bill is not meant to train teachers to become counselors, but rather to give them the information they need to educate their students on basic mental health topics and their own toolkits to manage difficult emotions in the classroom that the lack of counselors puts them in the position to handle. I should note here that per a presentation by the Nevada Department of Health and Human Services in July of 2022, our school psychologist ratio is 1 to 1,866, whereas the recommended ratio is 1 to 500. And our school social worker to student ratio is an astounding 1 to 8,730, 35 times the recommended ratio. The issue of teacher and student safety directly correlates with the mental health of the student body. With the shortage of school counselors, teachers are more frequently required to promote mental health and well-being, and identify and respond to emerging mental illness in their students. Moving along, Section 2 of the bill requires teachers to complete an approved course on mental health prior to renewing their license for the first time on or after July 1st, 2025. Currently, 27 states require some mental health training to get or renew their license per the Education Commission of the states. There has been much discussion about the 2,500 vacancies in our schools. In a presentation titled Overview of School Conditions and Recommendations to Improve Outcomes given to this committee in February, the main reasons teachers cited for leaving the profession beyond salary were, quote, 1, there are not enough social workers, counselors, school psychologists, etc. 2, schools aren't safe. And 3, too many schools have bad climates, end quote. These reasons all relate to a lack of mental health education and or support, which this bill begins to address by providing a sound education in mental health to both teachers and students. Before I close, I'd like to mention that crime, houselessness, and kids' inability to learn have all been tied to higher incidence of mental health issues. As of October 2014, according to the American Psychological Association, mental illness among today's inmates is pervasive, with 64% of jail inmates, 54% of state prisoners, and 45% of federal prisoners reporting mental health concerns. According to SAMHSA, 20 to 25% of the unhoused population in the United States suffers from some form of severe mental illness. Additionally, disadvantaged kids, especially those of color, are disproportionately less likely to receive mental health services. Racial, ethnic, gender, and sexual minorities often suffer from poor mental health outcomes due to inaccessibility of high-quality mental health care services, stigma surrounding mental health care, and discrimination. Offering a robust mental health curriculum in schools reduces stigma surrounding mental health issues and provides community-based resources which helps to reduce the barrier to care for those underserved communities. The cost of not teaching young people about mental health cannot be overstated. When mental illness goes untreated, a cascade of negative outcomes can occur. These can include reduced prospects for recovery, the development of negative coping behaviors, including substance abuse, the increased chance of legal trouble and consequent criminal records, compromised academic performance, and lower graduation rates. And most troubling, of course, is the increase of mental health emergencies, such as suicide and self-injury. Mental health subjects are unfortunately fraught with negative connotation, misunderstanding, fear, and stigma. Consequently, most of us are uncomfortable with these issues, and it's understandable that teachers may harbor attitudes that create barriers to talking about mental health with students absent a clear directive. This bill gives the clear directive that these subjects must be taught. The passage of SB 313 will represent a profound legislative achievement, ensuring all Nevada students and teachers will be better prepared for life. As you consider the need for this legislation, I will leave you with this final slide recapping all the many areas that the bill addresses. I'd like you to think about all the benefits mentioned in this slide, and also about your own everyday life. How often are you using some of the topics taught in school? How often would you use an education in topics approaching issues like relationships, self-compassion, coping skills, and many more? When you go back to this bill, please ask yourself how offering this type of education throughout 13 years of school would serve our students and our teachers. I'd also like to briefly mention that we have a conceptual amendment. However, we are still talking to the NDE and in the works of hammering that out. Thank you very much for your time, and I stand ready to answer any questions.
And thank you for that presentation. You want to open up?
Yeah.
And we'll go ahead and open up with Senator Neal, please.
Thank you. So I'm looking for the conceptual. So is there a change to section 1? No, kind of. This is your conceptual, the single page.
Robert Barsel, for the record, yes, that is the conceptual. It will be a change to section 1.
Okay, because I had I have questions on section 1, sub 4. And it ties into, so in existing law, right? And so let me preference this question. So in existing law, we had the council for cultural competency consult with members who represent racial and ethnic groups. But we didn't have in the statute folks that actually had knowledge, right? So when I looked at your language on the standards and working with mental health resources, I think it's important that the resources are also culturally sensitive to the communities in which they may interact with, right? Because all children are not equal, races are not monolith, and there are cultural behaviors that are passed down to children, right? So I'll give you an example. In my house, telling your business in the street was frowned upon. Crying is frowned upon. I don't care. You could probably fall off the roof, but you'd run in the house and cry, not openly, because it was seen as a weakness environmentally and culturally. And I don't think it's too different for children today, right? So you grow up with what your parents teach you and then this environment at school. And so I want to know how you will address that in section 1. And then I have a follow-up.
Robert Barsel, for the record. As we continue to work with the NDE about ironing out this conceptual amendment, I would definitely like to include more language about the resources specifically and how those resources can be tailored to individual school districts so that they are more inclusive of the specific districts and their needs.
Thank you for that. Because I think that's super, super important, because in your slide, you talked about trusted adults being a centerpiece, right? But if you've never had a trusted adult, nor do you trust your teacher, you're not going to divulge information that's going to open you up for bullying, open you up for a non-private conversation, open you up for a conversation with a teacher that maybe disrespects the information that you provide to them, right? And when I say disrespect, meaning you said something in confidence, you felt that they maybe could have had something of value to say, and then it turns out that they did not, right? So then the trust is totally diminished at that point, and there is no second person. So the training is good, but I want to know how that would be mitigated, or are you anticipating being involved, right? This passes into law, being one of the, peer-to-peer coaches when it gets implemented.
Robert Barsel, for the record. When it comes to the actual rollout of the bill, if it is passed, and when it comes to the development of training, I would love to be at that table giving a student perspective on how to best put together the training. And then I'd also like to mention that SAMHSA recently put together a report with a list of different types of training that are already available from national organizations like NAMI, and of those different trainings, some of them do specifically relate to sensitivity training and different trainings that relate to different cultural stigmas.
And then my last question's on section 2 on the substitute teacher piece. I know you mentioned in the bill if they were initially licensed or proof of completion, but I think substitute teachers just the same way as they take a pathogen webinar, that they probably should do something maybe a little bit more scaled down in terms of identifying things that they may encounter in the classroom, because you could have a long-term sub who's there for 6 weeks to 9 months, right? And so although they may not have the equal requirement as a licensed teacher, I still think that they potentially need to at least have an introduction to it, because you never know who you're going to encounter. And typically it takes a seasoned teacher to be able to pick off behavior. So this is kind of helpful if they get something to help them at least trigger. Maybe I had to ask somebody who's wiser than me how to handle this situation, because this is what I identified from my training. And those are the last of my questions, Vice Chair.
And next we'll go to Senator Titus, please.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, for the opportunity to ask a question. First, I want to compliment you and thank Senator Lang for bringing you today. It's truly refreshing, and your presentation was excellent. Your preparation better than many that we see here, so myself included. So just well done. I do have some concerns and some questions, and specifically related to the teachers' concern, the amendment proposed by the Nevada State Education Association, and that amendment that they proposed regarding the training of these teachers and the access to that. So you mentioned your proposed amendment. Did you address their concerns?
Senator Titus, Senator Lang for the record. So I just received that before I came up here, so I really haven't had a chance to have conversations further about that. I know that early on when I had a meeting with NSCA, they had mentioned something about that, but not kind of the concern that came up in this amendment. But it's my understanding that legal might have some information on that as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Asher Killian, Committee Counsel. So we haven't had any conversations with NSEA directly about this, but just in terms of the structure of the amendment, the change made in Section 2 is a one-time requirement to complete training. In Section 3, teachers who are licensed in the future from July 1st, 2025 going forward would complete this as part of their regular teacher training. Section 2 is kind of the catch-up provision for teachers who are currently licensed, that they would have to complete similar training one time by their first renewal on or after July 1st, 2025. So while NSEA's amendment speaks to more professional development and ongoing continuing education requirements, what the bill does is really just a one-time requirement to have received this additional training.
Thank you for that. And may I ask another question, sir?
Please.
So then on Section 3, going down to number 3, you use the term, must require an applicant for a license to teach in the state to complete a course in mental health education pursuant to Section 2 before the issuance of such a license. And I'm just wondering about the process there. We are so short of teachers, somebody coming from out of state applying to this state. I just have concerns about I know the intent is good, but I'm wondering if it's not going to delay getting new teachers and looking at the availability of this and access to it, and can they get a temporary license with so much time then to fulfill the requirement?
Senator Lang for the record. So we worked with higher ed on this part of the bill to make sure that they were going to be able to make this fit within their curriculum. And that's why we gave to 2025. I think when you look at states like neighboring states that are already doing this, they have those curricula already involved in their teacher training. And so for people to be able to get classwork, I think and coming from other states, and you look at where we get teachers from, I think that some of them probably will already have that. It's not meant to be a roadblock, it's meant to be a pathway.
And thank you for that, because there's no real clarification that you will accept training from other school districts. So that if somebody's out of state in one of the, would you say 27 states, there's a number of states that already require that, you don't really clarify that there will be reciprocity with this training. They wouldn't have to repeat the training here. If they've already had the training, that would be okay. So I just wondering about that need for clarification. Thank you.
And Senator Lang, for the record, we'll be happy to work with NDE on that, because I know that when teachers come in and they bring in their license from another state, they go over it and make sure it meets the criteria. So we'll work with them to ensure that this would do the same.
Members, any additional questions? Seeing none, thank you. I'll invite you both to sit back. And at this time, would like to invite those wishing to testify in support of Senate Bill 313. Carson City or Las Vegas. And we'll start here in Carson City. Welcome.
Thank you. Sheila Brave with the University of Nevada, Reno. For the record, we would like to voice our support for Senate Bill 313. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. Please.
Hello, Elise Monroy Marsala with Bell's Case Government Affairs here today on behalf of NAMI. First, I would like to commend the bill presenter for his amazing presentation. I'm floored, the level of work that he did. NAMI supports giving children the mental health coping skills, and this program being incorporated into the education standards, as this will promote youth resilience in our community. Thank you.
Ooh, and thank you for joining us. Anybody else in Carson City? Seeing none, we'll go to Las Vegas.
Firstly, I'd like to thank Robert Barsel for his testimony. Very well done. This issue is not talked about enough, and this bill will be a tremendous help to Nevada and those struggling. I'd also like to thank everyone here for their work.
Sorry
on
for
this
cutting
bill.
you off. Could we just have you state your name for the record and spell it, please?
So sorry about that. It's Trent Brinkus, Brenkus.
Please proceed.
And just want to say, oh, go ahead. Let's make schools a place where self-love, creative thinking, and leadership is the forefront of their teachings. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. Whomever wants to go next in Las Vegas.
Hi, before we begin, I just want to thank the committee for their time and hearing my testimony. My name is Ella King, Ellaking, and I'm a junior at Coronado High School and a teen committee co-chair for Hope Means Nevada. I'm here today to express my strong support for SB 313, which would ensure that Nevada students receive crucial mental health education. I have attended Henderson International School until 3rd grade, Wolf Elementary School for 4th and 5th grade, Del Webb Middle School for 6th through 8th grade, and Coronado High School from 9th grade to present. Throughout high school, I don't think I received any in-school mental health education. During online school over quarantine, the fall of 2020, Coronado had wellness checks once a week, but they were typically very brief and not educational. I had some education on healthy coping skills and dealing with stress during my 8th grade health class, but it was cut short by the COVID-19 pandemic. Additionally, about once a year at Del Webb, my school counselor would meet with each class and discuss various mindsets, particularly the growth and fixed mindset. Thinking all the way back to elementary school, I don't know what kind of mental health education I received. Besides the basics of emotions and respecting other people's emotions, I cannot recall any other mental health education at that educational stage. At all of my schools, I have had access to a school counselor, but I'm unaware of any other mental health professionals at those schools. None of my friends or peers that I've spoken to feel adequately prepared by our in-school mental health education because mental health is not often discussed by our schools or teachers. For this reason, I give my fullest support to SB 313. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. Next speaker in Las Vegas, please.
Good afternoon, committee. My name is Sierra Bellavance, Ciera Bellavance. I am the executive director of Hope Means Nevada. Hope Means Nevada is a community-based nonprofit focused on mental wellness and eliminating teen suicide in the state. We are pleased to show our support for SB 313 and the urgent need for more mental health curricula in Nevada schools. It is our mission to raise awareness of Nevada's high rates of mental health challenges and suicide, as well as connect youth with desperately needed services. Now more than ever, it is critical to provide access to mental health workers and suicide awareness and prevention information in Nevada schools, as stated in SB 313. In today's world filled with ongoing chaotic events, it is no surprise that many teens are experiencing heightened levels of stress, anxiety, and depression. Health education needs to extend far beyond physical health conversations and include mental health. We're also here to spread the message to youth that it's okay to not be okay and that mental health resources are available. SB 313 would not only provide more mental health curricula and resources, but also prepare teachers for how to handle these important conversations. SB 313 is fundamental in advancing Hope Means Nevada's mission of ending teen suicide in Nevada by providing access to the mental health resources and a community of hope. Thank you for allowing me to speak today.
And is there anybody else in Las Vegas? If I could please have all three of you vacate the seats in case anybody's trying to join us in Las Vegas. Anybody else from Las Vegas wishing to testify in support of Senate Bill 313? Seeing none, BPS, do we have anybody wishing to testify in support of Senate Bill 313?
To testify in support of SB 313, press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Again, to testify in support of SB 313, press star 9 to take your place in the queue.
Hi, my name is Abby Bernhardt, ABBEY, BERNHARDT. I am with the National Alliance on Mental Illness. At 3 years old, I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. I experienced manic episodes and rapid cycling. I had so much anxiety, sadness, and anger all at once. My favorite cartoon character was Cat. I felt I could spin just like him. Physically, I could not stop. Starting school was a challenge because no one really understood how to help me. My doctor only knew of 2 children as young as me diagnosed with bipolar disorder. I had trouble sitting still because I would have massive surges of energy that I could not control. I was instantly outcasted. Even a 5-year-old knows when they are not wanted. Often, I had so much anxiety before school, I would get nauseous and throw up on the bus, causing them to send me home. Even though I am very intelligent, I fell behind fast. Simple resources would have helped me so much, such as standing instead of sitting or bouncing on an exercise ball. I would have loved online learning or homeschooling. Educators always seem to think I was seeking attention when I just needed help. By middle school, the mania turned to depression. I was bullied by other students, which led to binge eating. I went to multiple schools promising resources and support that never materialized. At one school, the principal called me in every day to tell me I was hopeless and helpless and never going to amount to anything. If you're emotionally abused every day, you start to believe what you hear is true. She broke my spirit, and at 10 years old, I attempted suicide. It was a nightmare. Finally, after years of struggling, I was placed in online learning. This is something I needed years ago. It would have prevented me years of suffering.
And I apologize to cut you off. I'm really sorry that I have to cut you off. It's just that we have a 2-minute limit for the sake of transparency and fairness to everybody else wishing to testify. But if I could ask if you could please submit the rest of your testimony in writing so that it could be shared with the committee members and we can have your story told in its entirety, along with just your contact information should a member be interested in reaching out to you. And again, I apologize. Please don't take it as any disrespect. I just have to limit testimony at 2 minutes. So thank you for calling in. And BPS, could we please go to the next caller in support of Senate Bill 313?
Good afternoon. My name is Trin Dang, TRINHDANG. I'm the Executive Director of Navi Southern Nevada, peer-led mental health nonprofit. Prior to becoming Executive Director in January 2020, I was an educator. I spent my first 3 years teaching kindergarten at a charter school in Compton, California, 2 years in second grade in a traditional public school in California, and 1 year teaching middle school science and a year of high school life skills, both at separate charter schools in Vegas. I was also on the committee for implementing PBIS, positive behavior interventions, and support at 2 of the schools. And I'm here today to show my support for SB 313. Any teacher will tell you that classroom management is key to leading a successful class where children and adolescents can learn. However, oftentimes teachers are not equipped with the knowledge and tools to address behavior challenges stemming from mental health conditions or trauma. I was fortunate enough to have started out my college career as a psychology major and learned about mental health through NAMI education classes. Due to my lived experience with family members, including myself that live with mental health challenges, I have the knowledge and understanding on how to address some of the behavior challenges in a compassionate way that can help students regulate their nervous system and therefore their behaviors. We don't expect teachers to diagnose, and we're not expecting teachers to become school psychologists or counselors. However, we can incorporate social emotional learning. We can design lessons and classroom management strategies that include building self-awareness, social awareness, relationship skills, responsible decision-making, and self-management skills. For instance, when I was a teacher, we would incorporate a 5-minute mindfulness breathing exercise after lunch to get students ready to learn. Whenever a student came back from recess and had a negative experience, they were provided a 10-minute break with a friend. Students were taught to ask their friend how they felt, and the other student was taught to identify how they felt, how to express it using a sentence frame, how to engage in activities such as sharing about the incident, or choosing a book to read together, or just sitting with their friend without even saying anything, but just to be there for them. When there was a student that was throwing books and hitting other students,
Ma'am, I apologize
we stayed
to
behind.
interrupt you, but we have hit the 2-minute mark as well. If you could please submit the rest of your testimony via email to our committee staff, and we'll make sure that the members get an opportunity to read your full testimony. Again, thank you for calling in. BPS, next caller in support of Senate Bill 313, please.
Thank you. My name is Michael Willoughby, Willoughby, calling today on behalf of Alfaro Consulting. We're proud to be here in support of SB 313. We're proud to stand with our students and our teachers fighting for better access to mental health resources. We do share the same concerns that Senator Neal mentioned earlier, and additionally have some small concerns around individual educators shouldering the financial burden for the training in Section 2 and 3, but we do support the bill as it stands. Thank you very much.
And thank you for joining us. Next caller in support of Senate Bill 313.
If you have just joined us and would like to testify in support of SB 313, press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no more callers willing to testify in support at this time.
Thank you. We'll stay on the phone. Anybody wishing to testify in opposition to Senate Bill 313.
Testify in opposition of SB 313, press star 9 to take your place in the queue.
Good afternoon, Chris Daly, Nevada State Education Association. NSEA appreciates the importance of mental health education and the intent of SB 313. However, we are seeking amendments and clarifications to bill language related to requirements for teacher licensure. For licensure renewal, teachers are currently required to complete 15 hours of professional development per year. SB 313, on the other hand, requires the completion of at least 2 credits in a course in mental health for licensure renewal, which is similar to the old professional development regime. We would ask that language in SB 313 be amended to harmonize with the existing professional development requirements. Also, NSEA is concerned about access to the course envisioned in SB 313. Similar requirements in previous years have resulted in uneven access to professional development courses across the state. So we would ask any professional development required in SB 313 to be uniformly available to teachers across the state. Just a quick aside, I was able to have a conversation with Kelly Knight, and she did seem to understand these concerns. We look forward to working with the sponsors in NDE to work through this. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. Next caller in opposition to Senate Bill 313.
Chair, there are no more callers willing to testify in opposition at this time.
Thank you. Is there anybody in Las Vegas or Carson City wishing to testify in opposition to Senate Bill 313? Seeing none in Las Vegas, we'll come here to Carson City. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. For the record, my name is Carlana, Karlana, Kulseth, Kulseth. I'm speaking as an individual and educator from Clark County School District. Right now, what I'm hearing is our schools are not building relationships with students. And the reason being is that there's a huge push for student performance in showing successful boost in academics. We can't focus on both at the same time if we're consistently pushed towards mandated assessments that continually only look at academics and students' performance. My school last month did a survey asking the students if they were comfortable talking to at least one adult on campus. Out of 2,450 students, 23% of the students said they were only comfortable speaking to one adult on campus. I'm going to tell you right now, I love the intent of this bill, and I really would love to see it come forward because I've been asking my own school district since June 2021 before returning to schools in normal learning status. We need these resources. My students are acting out. All of our students are acting out. They don't know how to properly communicate what is bothering them, what may be affecting their learning environment. And the one stay true quote that comes to mind is Maslow before Bloom. We need to address survival needs, acceptance needs, community needs before we can go to learning. When it comes down to this intent, I'm a little skeptic about a couple things. First of all, if training is to be pushed out in the manner that a lot of our trainings in Clark County School District are pushed out, we're not going to get the true intent of what this bill really wants us to do. And we're not going to get the resources that we really need in the classrooms. Not just like, for instance, restorative justice right now in Clark County School District, it's 5-people team on each campus. I have 2,450 students on my campus. What are those 5 people can do when we can add on the other adults on campus to help? So please think about these as you go about and work on SB 313. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition to Senate Bill 313? Seeing none, now I'd like to invite those wishing to testify in the neutral position for Senate Bill 313. I don't see anybody in Las Vegas. We'll start here in Carson City. Whoever wishes to go first, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Mary Przinski, here representing Nevada Association of School Superintendents, an organization comprised of the 17 superintendents. We're in the neutral position on this bill. We understand and appreciate Senator Lang bringing forward a bill dealing with mental health education, so very, very important. Our only concerns were brought forward, I think, by Senator Neal and Senator Titus. It's just a licensure issue and not wanting any more barriers to teachers coming to Nevada. But as we understand from the presenter, there is work that's being done or will be done with the NDE to help overcome any concerns we have in licensure area. So right now we're in the neutral position and we are happy to help any way we can to resolve those concerns. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us, please.
Good afternoon. For the record, my name is Jamie Tedrinsky, TadrzyNski. I am a teacher in the Clark County School District. I have been there for 8 years and 11 years as an educator total. And I apologize in advance because I think maybe based on some of the other testimony we've heard that I would probably should be sitting in the opposition camp, and I'm not going to do that because first of all, I respect Robert's bill. It takes a lot of courage, especially as a high school student, to come here. And he was more eloquently spoken than a lot of adults I've encountered in my life. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate the intent behind the bill. I would love to fully stand behind it. And why I'm going to speak in neutrality with this bill is because I want to see a little bit more added to it. As a teacher, I love my students. I spoke to the finance committee this morning and spoke about like how I try to make my room inclusive and welcoming and like a home away from home for many of my students in North Las Vegas who don't have that. So for many of those kids, I am that foundation that they can like rely on. I also recognize that 80% of the teaching profession is white women, and that does not reflect the community in which I live and work. When we're talking about mental health, I am all for that, but I am concerned about another unfunded mandate being passed down onto educators. Another thing that is going to be put onto our plates in the middle of a national teacher shortage. If this was reworded a little bit more to provide adequate training for teachers, I would more firmly sit in support. As it stands, if we make some amendments to it, I feel that this bill has such great potential. And I love the fact that our students are the ones that are propelling this and that they're seeing what's happening in our communities, because I think that is very important. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us, please.
Hello, thank you. My name is Alexis Salt, Alexis Salt. I am speaking in the neutral position mostly because I need to let you know that your teachers are drowning. It's not that we don't want to help, we do. But we have so much on our plates already, we're making mistakes. Mental health, like I work in a charter school now. I was in Clark County for 16 years and I left, and I work on the historic West Side. And I was really listening to what you said, Senator, because I don't know that my students really want me meddling in their mental health. We have a good relationship. It's fantastic, but there are certain things that I, struggle to connect with them on, and they know that. And asking teachers to do one more thing, it seems like in this state, and actually all across the country, that whenever we don't have enough social workers, we don't have enough counselors, well, teachers can do it. We cannot. We are at the point where if you put one more thing on us, we are going to break. People are breaking and have been for several years. We like to act like this is something that became new over COVID, but it's not. I had a teacher when I worked at Jim Bridger in the next room attempt suicide, and this was years before COVID. So you have a profession right now where your teachers aren't okay. And to put the onus of being responsible for identifying those behaviors, I feel like it's going to be a one huge ask. And also, some of my kids are reading several grades below grade level. I don't know, if I'm being perfectly honest, that some of my kids could complete the workbook activities. We're working on syllables. So we need to be really careful that we're not mandating something that students cannot complete, and it will be another time suck, basically. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. Anyone else wishing to speak in the neutral position? BPS, do we have anybody wishing to join us over the phone? Neutral for Senate Bill 313.
To testify neutral in SB 313, press star 9 to take your place in the queue.
Good afternoon, CYRUS, correct me if I'm wrong, they wanted to add more psychologists in this bill. I'm just very concerned about that. Because I graduated from a high school and there was a psychologist, and it didn't really seem like he was helping the students. It felt like just more fear and anxiety was being added instead. And I felt like, yes, these students could have had some help but I think how they addressed it was not appropriate. And not to mention, there's been a lot of horror stories where school psychologists really don't help the kid. They just have their own self-interest agendas, and that's a totally different topic. So I would just, be cautious about adding more of these types of professions, because I think that, every student is different, and just because they need help, doesn't mean that the people who are supposed to help really gives them their medicine. Yield my time.
And thank you for joining us. Next caller in the neutral position for Senate Bill 313.
Chair, there are no more callers willing to testify neutral.
Thank you. And with that, we will now come back to Carson City and any closing remarks we may have. Please.
Thank you, Chair Flores. Senator Lang, for the record, I've asked Superintendent Ebert from the Department of Education to come up and talk. Oh, you're on the other side. To talk with you a little bit about the licensure question you asked. She gave me the answer while I was sitting in the audience, but I wanted all of you to hear it.
Thank you. For the record, State Superintendent Joan Ebert, the way the bill is written, the Department of Education would do the analysis. We would still go ahead and issue a license if the teacher coming from another state had not had that material with a provision. So they would need to have that coursework to be fully licensed, but we could issue a provisional license to move forward.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Senator Hammond, please.
If I could, Mr. Vice Chair, there was a question that was asked, or at least there was a statement made during the neutral testimony. I wanted to see if you guys could address that in your closing remarks. I think I spent a lot of my time here in the last 12 years trying to make sure I protected the teachers' time and what they were doing in the classroom and trying to make sure that we weren't adding to their plate. I saw this bill and I read it and I thought it actually was trying to help not only the teacher, the instructor, the educator, but the student as well, and sometimes talking through some of these issues together as this mental health has become more prevalent, or mental health awareness has become more prevalent, and the need to address it. And so if you could talk a little bit about how you see it being implemented and in the terms of not necessarily adding to the plate of the educator, but how you do this and making sure that we're not taking more of the time. It's not another thing that we're doing. It's something that they can do together with students. I'd like to hear that explanation because I think it's relevant now, as we heard a minute ago, and I appreciate all that you guys are doing on this.
Robert Barsel for the record. Starting with the teacher training portion, I'd like to assuage everyone's fears and state that the actual training isn't any additional training. It's just requiring that when you go for your first instance of renewing your license, that 2 of your credits are dedicated to mental health education. It's not an additional 2 credits, just a required allocation, so it won't be adding any additional training for teachers. And then when it comes to the classroom level, as far as implementing these different lessons, it is under the social and emotional learning curriculum, which is already incorporated throughout every level of education. For example, if you need to fulfill your reading requirements, you can have the SEL requirements and the reading requirements correspond with each other, where if you read about a certain mental health topic, you're fulfilling multiple requirements at once. This can extend to different fields, such as if you're talking about a certain STEM requirement, you can talk about physical health and anatomy and mental health, or you could talk about it from a historical perspective. These types of incorporations are already being done.
And we do have another question. Senator Neal, please.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I just thought about it while you were answering Senator Hammond. Where are the parents in this bill? Like, can we, seriously, we listen to the teachers. We've been listening all session. But there is a level of parent engagement here that probably should occur. Because when we talk about coping skills or the lack thereof, it's usually coming from somewhere else, right? And then there is a display that is happening in the classroom. And I don't know if the teacher will have time to teach the coping skill, but there's another party whether or not it's the parent, grandparent, whoever is the person that is supposed to raise that child, who probably should be also in that conversation, right? And I think that we have in CCSD, right, there used to be a FACES office. I don't know what they have now. Maybe they have a fake version of a teachers and parent engagement. But having the parents or that office or somehow be involved in how you can teach coping skills to the family without an intrusion of privacy, right? Because there has to be a conversation, because you can't teach that and then the kid go home and he's just like, I learned how to meditate, and the parent's like, what? Like, I don't understand. Go breathe in your room. But that doesn't help the situation of what they're dealing with, right? The emotional control of what they're dealing with. We've all been angry, right? We've all been upset. We've all been mad that some kid made fun of us in school, right? Whether or not 2nd grade, 7th grade, 10th grade, but we didn't go around and punch the crap out of somebody, right? So there's also a management of emotion and what do you do when you encounter conflict? But that also is something that has to be engaged on the family side as well, right? And so I just want to know if that's something else you can consider, because we put it on the school, but there's a home in play.
Senator Lang, for the record, I understand exactly where you're coming from, but we also try to tell parents that they should help their kids with their homework, and it doesn't happen a lot. So it's really hard while it's always the goal to get parental involvement, it's what we know we need. It's what we know moves everything forward. But I think to put that in the law would be overreaching at this point. And I think that it could be more said in the breadth and depth of the conversations that happen maybe in your in-service or in your teacher classes about how you could incorporate that.
And I don't think we have any additional questions. Anything else? Please.
Robert Barsel, for the record. Thank you, Vice Chair Flores. I'd just like to say in closing that promoting mental health and wellness leads to higher overall productivity, better educational outcomes, lower crime rates, stronger economies, lower healthcare costs, improved family life, and most importantly, improved overall quality of life. Having teachers get more mental health education helps them meet their students' needs where they are. We know that mental health cannot be separated from their ability to learn and thrive. And giving our teachers more knowledge enables them to understand, relate, and help their student outcomes. Giving our students more knowledge enables them to understand themselves, fellow students, and regulate emotions in a healthier manner that promotes a more harmonious classroom and creates more time for learning in core subjects. The intent of this legislation is to support both teachers and students. I truly believe that educating both about mental health will have a lifelong and meaningful impact. So I humbly request that you pass SB 313. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll just take a quick personal point of privilege to say thank you for presenting the bill. I also share the tone and sentiment of Senator Neal. I think I wasn't very comfortable with adults, and I wasn't raised in that type of environment. I always looked for folk that maybe looked like me, and I couldn't find them. But I do agree that inviting kids to participate in a conversation is a huge step. Sometimes you just got to open the door, and sometimes that's what the kid was waiting for. And so I appreciate where you're coming from, and I really do hope that your bill will do that. Will open the door and sometimes kids were just waiting for that to happen. But if we're not inviting them to do that, then, when's that opportunity ever exposed? So I appreciate you. Thank you for the bill. And with that, we'll go ahead and close out the hearing on Senate Bill 313. And